Sunday morning here on the Jersey Magazine at 105.5 WDHA. I'm Jim Monaghan, and my guest is John Fernandez and John Fernandez. If you're watching on the video, you will see two people tagged as John. One is actually Tom Baldino, and the other is John Fernandez, both from the Jersey Shore Jazz and Blues Foundation. Gentlemen, good morning and welcome to the Jersey Magazine.
Good morning,
Jim. Thanks for having us.
John, tell me how you got involved with the foundation.
Oh, with the foundation, well, years ago, you raise kids and you somehow slip back into music, or at least that was my experience. And I started going to jams to try and get my chops back up. And I saw that there were these guys always around that were the same group, and they were, sponsoring and just helping people who played our style of music, blues and jazz. And I said, you know what? I like these guys. Let's see what they're doing. I joined up. I attended their meetings, and that was 20 or more years ago. They also held a lot of different festivals, which were like top shelf in many different towns at the Jersey Shore. And it was just a great organization. Still is. Downsized a little bit. COVID was kind of kicked us a little bit, but that's my pooch. Saving the day, right? But so that's it in a nutshell.
And Tom, I'll ask you the same question. How did you get involved?
I lived in the Jersey Shore. I grew up here. I went to Asbury Park High School. Spent many years on the shore. Worked on the boardwalk. Went to tons of shows at Convention Hall and all that stuff. I was around for the beginning of the rock scene back in the early to mid 60s, and knew a lot of people who were involved in it. And I moved away for about 30 years, and I came back about 20 years ago. And one of my good friends down here took me to an event at the Stone Pony, and it was a Jersey Shore Jazz and Blues event, and I really enjoyed it. Had a great time, and eventually I joined up, and now I've been president for 9 years.
One of the things that I wanted to talk to you guys about was an event that actually happened a few weeks ago. It was a benefit show that you did called Band Together, a veterans fundraiser. Tom, one of the unique things about the show was that every band that participated had a veteran in it. How did that come about?
Well, I'll let John take that because that was really his doing. So, but that was a great thing, and we've done this before, so that wasn't the first one.
Yeah, music. I remember going. I am a veteran. I remember being on the USS Ticonderoga. We did flight ops. I was a helicopter crewman, and seems like there was a lot of guitars, a lot of instruments, a lot of people who played. And it turned out that years later, we saw that there was a real need to try and support our local veterans. And it turns out you can't really tell a veteran by just looking at somebody. They don't wear a badge on their shoulder or anything, but it turns out that I met a lot of people who were veterans at one time, who played instruments and did so at a very proficient level. We also helped some of the guys who were not so proficient start to get up to speed so that they could participate and play music. And it worked out real well. I reached out to the bands and I said, hey, do you have any veterans in your bands? Okay. Would you be willing to play this benefit for us? And musicians are always a very generous lot, so they all pitched in, and we were able to get vets, and occasionally we slipped a vet in who didn't have a band but was a good player, and we just put the whole show together, and it just happened to work out great. And everybody came away with a really positive feeling, especially the veterans.
You mentioned veterans and playing music. I actually just saw a picture. And I can't believe that I never saw the picture before, and B, that I didn't know this either. Toy Caldwell from the Marshall Tucker Band served in Vietnam. I had no idea. And I'm pretty sure it was a picture of him with a guitar at some base that he was stationed at in Vietnam. Wow, I never knew that about him. But you're right, there are so many veterans who play over the years. How many different bands did you have this year?
What do we have? Top of my head, 7?
6 or 7, yeah.
Yeah. One solo act in the beginning.
Yeah, solo act, yeah. 6
female a veteran. Last time we did this pre-COVID, we had a band headed by 2 bands headed by female veterans. Yeah, everybody had like there was one band that had three vets, another band that had one, our band had two. Um, it's just a mix of different people.
Tom
And you
Bald,
saw the video, I guess, right? So you
yes.
can kind of get the feel for how they felt about, participating in this event and what it meant to them. People came away with a real positive feel. So I'm sorry.
Tom Baldino and John Fernandez, my guests this morning here on the Jersey Magazine from the Jersey Shore Jazz and Blues Foundation. What kind of other work does the foundation do?
Well, the foundation, again, it was founded back in 1987. One of the primary movers, Bob Santilli, who you might know that name
Sure.
from the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame and the Grammy Museum, was one of the founding members. We had several others who were involved in music. One, Rich Skelly, who's still with us, does the low budget blues show on WRSU on Thursday nights. And
that's the Rutgers station, by the way,
yes.
for our DHA listeners.
Yes, it is. And we kind of picked up the ball from there. They started doing big festivals in Red Bank. That was the calling card back in the day. And then we branched out from that and we did festivals all around. But really what we do is we promote, preserve, and perpetuate indigenous music, primarily jazz and blues, but it kind of branches out from there. Other styles that are closely related. And we also try to get youth involved. That's a big thing with us. Every year we give out scholarships to several youth. This year we gave out 4 to kids who are graduating high school and going on to take music in college. Many of them go to the Berkeley School, which is known as one of the top music schools in the country. And we got some really good kids coming out of there. One of our previous scholarship winners, Matt Wade, is now playing keyboards for Samantha Fish and traveling the country. So she's doing very well, and he is. And we saw them back in November. They were here at the Stone Pony. But those are the primary things that we do. But when John and another former board member, Charlie Wolf, got involved, we started to look at what we could do for the veterans and how we could help. And they were already helping. John was teaching and Charlie was setting up programs. And we said, what can we do to help? Because it's an important thing. And that's kind of how we got involved in that.
Let me ask you both the same question. John, what is it about the blues that appeals to you most?
Well, when I first got back into music, the thing about it was, like I said before, you're raising kids, you're mowing the lawn, you're doing a lot of pretty boring things, but just go along with, living your best life, I guess. And to learn a song like a rock and roll song, something that's polished, I always throw out Hotel California. You got to learn every part of it. You have to learn the solo note for note. Otherwise, you got to have the harmonies down. Otherwise, people can say, well, it doesn't sound like the record, right? So I can get up there with, like, we go to the jams. There's a jam tonight at the Colts Neck Inn, right? And it's just guys that sign up. I'm a guitar player, get a drummer who I may have never met before, a bass player, keyboard player, whatever. It's just, they go across the line. Whoever signs up in chronological order goes up together. Now, without knowing a song, I could say, give me a shuffle in the key of A. Let's start it from the 5. Watch me from the stops. Everybody knows how to play that.
Mm-hmm.
So the improvisational nature of the blues was a lot easier and challenging, to tell you the truth, because I can never play the same thing twice. You know what I mean? So, so that's why I gravitated to the blues. A lot of people have a misconception of it. They think it's a sad, no, you can do a sad blues song. Most of the stuff is like filled with joy. So,
Tom, I'll ask you the same question. What was it that attracted you to the blues?
Well, again, like John, I'm not a musician, but I grew up with rock and roll, obviously, and then as I looked at rock and roll and I read liner notes, I saw these names that I didn't know, Muddy Waters or whoever it was that had written some of these songs originally, especially with a group like Led Zeppelin, who took a lot of those old blues tunes and reworked them. And I kind of got back into that. I found out, hey, I really love this music. It's uplifting. It's good for your soul, and it sounds great. And to watch these guys do what they do, it just amazes me. I always say, if you could speak the language, you can do it, and that's what they do. They all speak the language of music.
Kind of reminiscent of that line from the Crosby, Stills, Nash song, "If you smile at me, I will understand," because that's something everyone does in the same language. And pretty much music does the same thing, whether it's rock and roll or blues or doo-wop or pop, whatever it happens to be.
Mm-hmm.
I've had a number of guests on over the past few months, and one of the things that we've talked about is the way music gets segmented. Whether it's rock and roll or
Right.
jazz. You talk about the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Well, that's not rock and roll. Well, okay, define rock and roll. And I actually love when the lines get blurred. And the name of your organization, the Jazz and Blues Foundation. Well, where does jazz start? Where does it end? Where do blues start? Where do the blues end? Right?
It's a continuum, and there's stuff along that continuum, and that's the way that works. That's why we don't like to limit it. We have a youth open mic that we do once a month at the Women's Club in Red Bank, and these kids come in and they're all between like 12 and 18 years old, and we let them do whatever they want. The purpose being that we want them to have a safe environment, to feel good about what they do, to get positive feedback from their peers and from the adults that have come there. And it really is great. And a lot of them who may have taken up an instrument and then just shuffled it off to the side, have kept up with it, and now they're going to do it in college, and they're going to go on. We have one of our ex-president's sons who he'll be graduating next year, and he wants to go to college to do music education. So that's a wonderful thing,
John, you mentioned a few minutes ago that the blues isn't necessarily sad, and you do this Sunday night concert series in Long Branch. And in fact, on the 17th, Billy Hector is playing. And Billy is a perfect example of the blues doesn't necessarily have to be sad, because he's one of the most uplifting performers I've ever seen live.
He was spoiled. He used to play right down the street from me at Marlins in Point Pleasant. I used to go there every, I think it was Wednesday night when he'd play, Thursday night, that's right. And I remember distinctly going to one of the Red Bank Riverfest concerts, right, that the Jersey Shore Jazz and Blues Foundation used to host. And there's a hill leading up to the stage. It just drops down. It's almost like a little amphitheater. And I turned to the person I was with, and everybody was sitting down. I said, take a look at this now and wait till he starts playing. There won't be one person seated. They'll all be dancing.
Yep.
And sure enough, he started playing. He's infectious. He's just got such a great style. His players are top notch. It really is. You're in a funk, go see Billy Hector. He'll bring you right out of it.
Tom Baldino and John Fernandez, my guests this morning here on the Jersey Magazine from the Jersey Shore Jazz and Blues Foundation. Tom, I wanted to ask you, you've got a big event coming up August 27th, the Jersey Shore Jazz and Blues Festival. What can you tell our listeners about that?
Well, I can tell them that this will be the first time since 2019 that we've been able to do it. Obviously, what happened in 2020, and in 2021 we tried to do a scaled down version, and unfortunately went rained out, so we didn't have it that year. So we're keeping our fingers crossed. But the headline band is the Ghost Town Blues Band. They're out of Memphis, and a great band, really terrific guitarists, horn players, and singers. It's going to be a fabulous show. And the other reason that local people will definitely want to show up is Sonny Ken is coming up here from Florida. He will be what we call the heater act or the headliner. And Sonny's a great guy, a great player, and he's a great artist. I have a piece of his artwork in my house. If you haven't seen his art, you should Google him and go look at his artwork. It's unbelievable. As good as guitarist he is, he's that good as an art.
And he is a really, really fine guitar player.
Yeah. Well, that's why I said he's at the top of his level in both categories. And I met Sonny many years ago. I had the privilege to go to the Upstage when I was a kid a couple of times, and Sonny was there with Southside Johnny and Bruce and Vinny Lopez and all the people that populated that place after hours to just play, and it was a real seeding ground for the great music that came after it.
Tom, you mentioned when we started that you were into rock and roll in the early days in Asbury Park in the mid to late 60s. And I'll be showing my age here, but the very first concert I went to was Convention Hall in Asbury Park. The opening acts were a couple of bands that had won some Battle of the Band contests, and the headliners, and they were huge at the time, the Cowsills.
Oh, wow.
And they were marvelous, those voices, because they were able to pull it off live. And I've actually run into a couple of the Cowsills over the years since then.
Oh, that's cool.
And been able to tell stories about that. And their voices are just as good now as they ever were. They've gotten some great stuff going. For DHA listeners who want to learn more about the Jersey Shore Jazz and Blues Foundation, it is a registered 501c3. You can go online to JSJBF.org. JSJBF.org. Tom Baldino and John Fernandez, I want to thank you so much for joining me this morning here on the Jersey Magazine, and continued success with the foundation.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you so much for having us, Jim.